With the High Elves getting a lot of attention, let's not neglect their Dark Cousins, the Druki. This replay from Skarbrand. He's going to be going up against Kaiju's Tzeentch, and you can see already the Changeling has transformed into T'Challa, so let's go ahead and take a look at the builds. Malekith leading the way for the Dark Elves. This is going to play out in many ways just how Dark Elves versus Warriors of Chaos, which is essentially what this is for Tzeentch. This matchup has basically played out the same way for quite some time, which is classically that the Dark Elves are going to try and do some mobility kiting here. Lots of hit-and-run tactics with these Cold One Knights and kiting with the Scourge Runners. He's also got some repeater crossbows as well. And then Malekith as the centerpiece, a few speed bump oblique swords, more or less glorified roadblocks. And then on the opposite side, of course, Warriors of Chaos don't have access to Zangors, but we've got some fast, relatively cheap infantry. Zangors all across the board here. Then some Chaos Knights going to be trying to catch things. And Blue Horrors with Metal Sorcerer and T'Challa. I say it's playing out similarly. From the Dark Elves side, really doesn't change that much. But, of course, Tzeentch has its own quirks. The barrier being one of them. When you're kiting against Tzeentch, you definitely have to efficiently focus, fire on the right targets, and not be wasting too many shots doing barrier damage, which in the long run isn't going to benefit you that much. Excuse me. I'm still... Apologies about that. Still getting over a slight illness I picked up while I was on my European trip. But anyway, Scourge Runner Chariots do a nice hit-and-run charge there on those Zangors. Of course, just light infantry, going to take some pretty good damage from that. Though the barrier does absorb quite a bit of it. Cold One Knights also pushing up and through, and Malekith trying to avoid T'Challa. He is definitely a much worse duelist and will get absolutely crushed by her in combat, so wise to stay away for now. One unit of Chaos Knights gets a little bit far forward, gets kind of enveloped by the Cold One Knights. Yeah, Chaos Knights taking some damage, but then T'Challa moves in, does some big AoE blast, gets a bunch of those Cold One Knight models down. We can see the Tzeentch kind of piling up all their cavalry here. Over on this side, Kaiju trying to overwhelm, and a little bit of Searing Doom on these Cold One Knights. Will do some pretty good damage, maybe a little bit of friendly fire on those Chaos Knights as well, but Scourge Runner Chariots hanging tight and shooting their anti-large bolts, trying to do whatever damage they can here. And Blade Wind also being used. Nice AoE spell. It's relatively cheap and efficient. Relatively low uptime, but high damage. Yeah, 11 Winds of Magic. Actually not that cheap, but Malekith might be wanting to save for Soul Stealer as he gets charged by T'Challa there. Stand your ground is popped, and then he is going to maneuver away. Yeah, nicely done there to just try and avoid getting absolutely hard capped by T'Challa, but she is relentless and will continue pursuing there. A little bit of murderous prowess map wide as the Dark Riders move in. They're going to rear charge those Chaos Knights. More Chaos Knights moving in to attack. Yeah, with that extra charge bonus, they actually do some pretty good damage to the Chaos Knights, but obviously are going to get crushed in a long-term combat here, though. There's just a lot of numbers for the Dark Elves in general. They're doing quite well in that way. Malekith, unfortunately, not doing well. Is going to have to maneuver away from T'Challa here. The Blade Wind trying to do whatever damage it can. Slangor is doing a decent job. Their extra speed definitely benefits them in a situation like this, where you're trying to prevent yourself from getting kited too hard. Chaos Knights also pretty good speed, and able to catch a lot of stuff. But if you look at the ranged component here, the repeater crossbows and the Scourge Runner Chariots are mostly pretty healthy. One Scourge Runner Chariot here getting a little bit caught up in combat, but critically hasn't lost any unit models yet, so is still more or less fighting at full strength, though. Ooh, big another block of burst damage, and likely they're going to lose some models here. Yeah, those big old Chaos Knights are quite hefty lads. Once they surround the chariots, it's incredibly difficult to escape. T'Challa also just absolutely mincing anything that comes close to her, so gotta stay on the move and use her various dances. Right now, Dance of Destruction's the main one, just to increase that weapon strength, hit a little bit harder. It's not really a lot that can challenge her in melee right now, so he's really gonna have to use his range units to try and damage T'Challa down. Skarbrand, that is, the Dark Elf player here. Yeah, you see the repeater crossbows pulling up, get a nice clean volley. Does some damage to the Chaos Knights, but the supporting Knights are getting quite low. We've got just a couple of units here with like a quarter HP-ish. Maybe even a little bit less, and then the Dark Elves are able to mostly clean up everything else. Sangor's running for the hills. Another Searing Doom, this time on just Dark Riders, which is understandable. You want to do whatever damage you can to whatever targets you got in range, but he's going to do some friendly fire on those Sangors as well. Dark Riders moving away, and more crossbow bolts being shot here. Yeah, the Dark Rider repeater crossbows actually have lost some unit models at this point, but still mostly fighting at full strength. And then we still have a couple of the Scourge Runners trying to use their ammunition very efficiently. They still have quite a bit of ammunition left, but a really nice Soul Stealer. Great way to deal some direct damage to T'Challa. And it's going to heal Malekith ever so slightly. Not that he has a ton of capacity to heal on just Cold One mount. Given its percentage-based healing, obviously not going to be as impactful as if he was up on the dragon, but he is quite a bit cheaper, of course. Malekith on the dragon is just very expensive in general. But T'Challa is going to move in. Malekith once again scoots away, not wanting any of that smoke. Searing Doom. Swing and a miss on that one. But Chaos Sorcerer of Metal trying to just protect himself. He is on foot at this, not at this point, but he is has been on foot the entire time. But if he does get surrounded by these cavalry here, that will be a great opportunity for him to use that Searing Doom to best effect. But Dark Rider Repeater Crossbows finishing off some Chaos Knights there. And trying to continue moving. The one Cold One Knight here is going to maneuver to support, but they get a little bit caught up on T'Challa there, and then all of a sudden the Chaos Knights with Lance is going to turn around and countercharge at the last second. Not that it'll do a whole lot, but it will pin them in place momentarily for another attempted Searing Doom, which catches a couple of unit models, especially the ones that run through there towards the end. It's going to do some damage, but probably not as much as Kaiju would have liked here. The Tzeentch Bombardment also hits Malekith pretty hard. And then T'Challa is going to move in with her blades aplenty. Malekith once again just absolutely wants no part of this. But now T'Challa, without support, does have Dark Elves have clean firing lines to try and bolt her down. So the Scourge Runner Chariots there running a little bit into melee to try and screen Malekith, make sure he doesn't die. The Dark Rider is also being thrown into screen at this point. And despite the balance of power flipping pretty far in Dark Elves' favor at one point, T'Challa is definitely no pushover. As long as she's alive, she has this Metal Sorcerer to back her up, it's going to be dangerous. So now finally Skarbrand gets a really nice opportunity to try and focus fire. It's about time, too. Those Scourge Runners are starting to run very low on ammo, but ooh, that volley mostly missed as she was on the move, and bolts were not able to make sufficient contact. Dark Riders desperately trying to get away. There's a few hits there, but T'Challa's small unit model definitely coming into favor at this point, as it's relatively hard to hit when she's on the move. Anti-large bonus, of course, does apply from the Scourge Runner Chariots. Despite her small size, she does count as large. We're going to see another Soul Stealer here as Malekith desperately tries to hang on. Healing might just make the difference here, but not if he can't get away. Again, anti-large bonus applies. Cold One Knights are going to be a really great way to screen. Knock her down momentarily, but she pops up, does the Dance of Blades, which is just going to cleave through whatever unit models are nearby, do some pretty massive AoE damage. And the Searing Doom caster is also still alive. So if they commit to a full surround here, it could be dangerous. Ooh, he actually goes for an overcast Searing Doom, just to try and catch as many unit models as possible. Maybe to charge up that army ability a little bit more as well, but yeah, Malekith gets one more hit on him. Can he get away? One more hit will probably finish him off. And then the Dark Elves are definitely going to be in some leadership trouble, but T'Challa also could run into some leadership issues here. She's quite low at this point and can't take too much more damage. Otherwise, that Terror will be off the field, and I do think the Terror will come into play. None of these Dark Elf units are immune to Psychology, except Malekith himself even immune to Psychology? Okay, he is. So he won't Terror out, but he might just die anyway, right? That's the whole point. So, ooh, that Searing Doom popped up for a split second, and then he gets knocked down, gets back up again, throws another Searing Doom. And will definitely hit some unit models as they come into fight. Again, at this point, it's also kind of just about warding these units away, trying to route them. That Tzeentch army ability comes in, hits Malekith. He's down to 8 HP. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, and somehow he hasn't routed yet. He's just wavering at 8 HP. Oh, let's see here. Let's see here. Changeling T'Challa continuing to fight. The Scourge Runner Chariots is kind of cycle charging at this point, trying to delay hers for as long as possible. Dark Rider Repeater Crossbows get a volley in. Down below 700 HP. Right around 600. Still holding the leadership for the time being. Little miscast there. And another Searing Doom pops. That is going to basically finish off those Cold One Knights. Yeah, the Bleak Swords get routed, but let's see. There's 3 more volleys here for these Dark Riders. Can they get sufficient contact with their Scattershot bolts to be able to finish the Changeling off here? Oh, T'Challa does the Whirlwind of Pleasure, but actually does rout momentarily. Will it end up mattering? As Malekith is still hanging around here. He's going to pop that Stand Your Ground. T'Challa being chased off by the Cold One Knights. Not great by any means. Another Searing Doom, though. And Malekith is going to very bravely finish himself off with a Blade Wind. Absolute high-style move from Skarbrand here. T'Challa also gets finished off by the Cold One Knights, and I'd imagine that's going to army loss, despite the loss of Malekith. Yeah, there's still a couple more volleys here. And at point-blank range, the Repeater Crossbow is going to unload on the Tzeentch Metalcaster, and that will be game over. Right? Surely. Surely it's game over. There's no way he can actually finish this, right? Oh, he's running for it. Nope, that's it. Yeah, Skarbrand manages to take the win there. And, you know, Blade Winding Malekith to finish himself off. True Chad behavior, to be honest, and ultimately a very fun and close game. The Dark Elves were able to prevail, but this sort of this version, you might say, of the classic dynamic of Dark Elves versus Warriors of Chaos, definitely with some changes, obviously, in thematic with Tzeentch. Many things have changed from this side, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they still kind of get caught in the same trap as ever of getting kited down and kind of picked apart by the mobility here, although it does end up being brutally close. You know, the barrier definitely helps. The Changeling into T'Challa gives you a really strong mobility option that also helps. In a situation like this, I do think Mask, it's hard to say if Mask would have been better. Mask has less HP, although it does not count as large, so won't be taking as much damage from the Scourge Runners. You know, you'd have the AoE drain effect, but not quite as much stats. Like, let's have a comparison real quick after we look at these values. Yeah, I mean, it's mostly just T'Challa Changeling, but I'd imagine Malekith probably still loses to Mask. Conveniently, Mask is right here. So let's have a think about this. As we look at the Dark Elves, we can grab Malekith and put him on his Cold One to compare. Or spells notwithstanding. I say spells notwithstanding. Soul Sealer is probably going to be a factor in this particular matchup. Malekith a bit more expensive, but yeah, I mean, Mask still technically has better overall stats, more weapon strength, which is kind of surprising how low Malekith's weapon strength is. Very much like a Game 2 level weapon strength of an elf. But the Mask has better weapon strength, better melee defense. The Dance is, of course, significantly less armor, and somehow even slightly more HP than Malekith on the Cold One. So very interesting. I would probably give the advantage to the Mask, especially with the, well, Staff Masks also included. That evens up the price a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, it's still probably not an engagement that Malekith wants to take straight up. There's a chance he could win, definitely based on dice rolls, given just how close their combat stats overall are. But, yeah, Malekith's physical resist isn't going to end up mattering in that direct matchup because Mask still has magic damage. But T'Challa obviously has even better stats, right? Like, markedly better, slightly better attack and defense. Significantly better weapon strength, and the speed also is slightly higher, which does actually matter here. Yeah, Mask is only slightly faster, whereas T'Challa's like significantly faster, so I don't know. It's an interesting comparison. Maybe Kaiju would have been better served just to go with Mask there anyway, due to the things we've talked about. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.